You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 586, Shattered.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we set our temporal attention to an episode of Star Trek, examining every moment for morals, meanings, and messages, and asking if it stands the test of this or any other time.
This week, Shattered, the one where Chakotay has time enough at last because Voyager is absolutely lousy with temporal anomalies. Want to jump back a few years? That's in Sickbay. Want to see the future? That's in the mess hall. Well, all right, maybe better to stay out of there. I'll be right back with trivia, but first, here's Norman to tell all of you how to reach us.
We would love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
All right, let's talk about Shattered. We have a story credited to Mike Sussman and Michael Taylor. Familiar names here. Mike was a writer's intern and had sold a few story pitches before being brought on as story editor on Voyager. And previously, we discussed his teleplay for Body and Soul. Of course, Michael Taylor goes back to DS9 for The Visitor and In the Pale Moonlight, among others. His tenure on Voyager was much longer, being credited with a full 20 episodes. Now, the teleplay is credited to Michael Taylor, and coincidentally, his previous story credit was on Body and Soul, for which Mike Sussman wrote the teleplay. So we've got these two complementing each other's work nicely. This was directed by Terry Wendell, and we're coming up to the end of Terry's time with Voyager. He's got 2 more episodes before a short stop at Enterprise, and the most recent of his Voyager episodes that we discussed was Critical Care. Let's meet our guest stars. Welcome back to a number of guest stars who we've seen before on Voyager. We get 2 characters from the Captain Proton simulation, Dr. Chaotica and Lonzak, again played here by Martin Rayner and Nicholas Worth, respectively. Martha Hackett is back as Seska, making her final Voyager appearance and marking her last Star Trek franchise appearance thus far. New to the show, we've got a Kazon Rulat, played by Anthony Holliday. He was just a few years into his career with this episode, and he's back later in the season as a different character. And since Voyager, Anthony has worked steadily, mostly in TV. Recently, though, he had a recurring role in a YouTube series called Weird City, created by Jordan Peele and starring none other than LeVar Burton. Also new, we've got a security officer, well, not totally new, but Andrews. He is played by Terrell Clayton, and he's got a pretty full resume and had a recurring role on 6 Feet Under, as well as Barbershop and How to Get Away with Murder. Earlier in his career, Terrell turned up on shows like Melrose Place and Beverly Hills 90210. He even had a role as one of the crew in the TV movie Growing Up Brady in 2000. That was about the making of the Brady Bunch. And this episode, it is actually the 3rd of his Voyager appearances. He turned up in Season 1 and in Season 3, but this is the first and only time that he gets an on-screen credit. Now, the Icheb and Naomi Wildman characters are back as we would expect, but we see future versions of both characters as more mature adults. The adult Icheb was played by Mark Bennington, and adult Naomi is played by Vanessa Branch. So Mark Bennington already had a varied background as a theater actor, a professional photographer, and a drummer for the band 50 Cent Haircut. His earliest TV credit is shortly before this episode of Voyager. He actually debuted on an episode of Diagnosis Murder and then appeared in a handful of TV shows before this, his sole Trek appearance. He relocated, though, to Mumbai and has ever since appeared in multiple productions based in India. Finally, adult Naomi Wildman, played again by Vanessa Branch. And wow, again, we have an example of an actor making an appearance early in their career, but my, how Vanessa expanded her career later on. After more TV guest appearances, she landed the role of Giselle in the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie in 2003 and has appeared in all three of its sequels so far. And you may also have caught Vanessa on Criminal Minds, Days of Our Lives, or in numerous films and shorts. Interestingly, Vanessa was born in the UK, but holds dual citizenship with the US and was Miss Vermont in 1994. And you may have originally been introduced to her early in her career as the spokesperson for Orbit Gum in a memorable, highly successful campaign that started in 2001 and ran for nearly 10 years.
Of all the things Chakotay could have been in this episode, scattered, splattered, somewhat tattered, maybe it's best he was only shattered.
Prologue. In Cargo Bay 2, Icheb tutors Naomi Wildman using a DNA-themed jigsaw puzzle, a creative teaching method he hopes Seven won't discover, as he's supposed to be writing a paper on transwarp instability. When Chakotay interrupts them during a covert trip to retrieve a rare bottle of Antarian cider, Icheb swears to keep his secret, after offering tips on how to hide it from an ever-nosy Neelix. Later, in Janeway's quarters, the captain is in mid-replicator repair when Chakotay arrives with the cider. Their lighthearted exchange, including a painful reminder of a burnt pot roast, is interrupted by a sudden gravimetric surge that begins overloading Voyager's systems. In astrometrics, Seven detects a spatial rift emitting high levels of neutrinos and chronotons opening ahead. With the warp core destabilizing, B'Elanna evacuates engineering. Chakotay arrives to help and chooses to stay behind to clear out engineering when he is struck by a powerful energy surge. Both Voyager and Chakotay shimmer with a similar energy glow, and part of his face becomes aged and disfigured. B'Elanna immediately orders him beamed to Sickbay. Act 1. Chakotay awakens in Sickbay as the doctor examines him, explaining that his body has been caught in a state of temporal flux with aged organs mismatched across time. The doctor, acting even more curmudgeonly than in recent years, stabilizes Chakotay with a chronoton-infused serum. When Chakotay learns he can't reach the bridge and that there may be more injured crew members, he insists the doctor come along. Both are surprised when Chakotay notices that the doctor's mobile emitter is missing. In the turbolift, Chakotay, carrying a medical kit, passes through a shimmer of energy. The kit disappears before he reaches the bridge, and Chakotay finds himself aboard an earlier version of Voyager where the crew doesn't recognize him. Janeway, sporting her old hairstyle, assumes he's a Maquis saboteur and orders him escorted to the brig. Chakotay accidentally escapes custody through another temporal shift and gets back to basics in engineering, where he's captured by Seska and her Kazon Nistrim sect. One of them knocks Chakotay out with a violent blow to the head. After playing good cop and treating his wound, Seska quickly shifts to bad cop and demands access to Voyager's systems. Chakotay fights back and escapes by fleeing into another temporal rift. This time, Seska takes notice. Something is very wrong aboard Voyager. Act 2. Chakotay makes his way back to Sickbay and has the doctor confirm the stardate. It is 49624, a year before the doctor is given the mobile emitter. Chakotay explains that Voyager has been fractured into multiple time periods. The chronoton serum administered earlier allows him to move between them. He asks the doctor to replicate a hypospray casing using the same technology, intending to inoculate others to help restore the ship, and he needs help to do it. Chakotay returns again to Janeway 1.0's bridge, who still assumes he's a Maquis saboteur. To prove he's from the future, Chakotay shares personal details about Janeway's life. Still skeptical, she brings him to her ready room to analyze the serum. When she refuses to test it, Chakotay abducts, inoculates, and drags her through a temporal barrier. Now on the other side of her timeline, Janeway realizes that Chakotay is telling the truth. He convinces her to accompany him to Astrometrics, a lab Voyager doesn't have yet in her time, but will, thanks to Harry Kim and Borg tech. Janeway agrees despite concerns about violating the temporal prime directive. Along the way, they pass through red alert zones filled with unconscious crew. Chakotay speculates it could be the day Voyager fell victim to a telepathic plant or dream-invading aliens. Both events they eventually survived. In Astrometrics, Chakotay and Janeway are met by adult versions of Naomi Wildman and Icheb. Shocked upon seeing their commanding officers, they reveal that Janeway and Chakotay died 17 years ago. Act 3. Adult Naomi Wildman confirms that Voyager has been fractured into 37 distinct timeframes due to a chronokinetic surge interacting with the warp core which shattered their localized space-time continuum. Although the section where the surge originated has been destroyed, they theorize that if they can return Voyager to the moment of the incident, they might be able to prevent it. Chakotay believes that 7 of 9's expertise in temporal mechanics is the key to reversing the initial temporal explosion, but he and Janeway will have to find her in a past version of Cargo Bay 2 during Voyager's brief alliance with the Borg. When they do, 7 of 9, who has not yet begun reverting to her human form, suggests projecting a chronoton field through the ship to restore temporal sync. Janeway proposes using Voyager's bioneural circuitry injected with the chronoton serum to transmit the field. 7 suggests assimilating them to speed up the process, but Janeway declines. Along the way, putting aside the temporal prime directive for the moment, Chakotay reassures Janeway with a quote from Dante's Inferno, a book she will one day lend him, even though it was originally gifted to her by Mark, her fiancé back on Earth. Back in Sickbay, Janeway and Chakotay prepare serum-infused ammunition belts, modified by the Doctor, who reveals he's been active for nearly 3 years since the original Doctor died. Janeway, still learning about the ship's future, suggests they split up, but Chakotay insists they stay together for safety. As they inject gel packs into different parts of the ship, they are chased by a macrovirus from a past encounter. Janeway gives into her anxiety, but Chakotay reminds her that Starfleet captains don't choose their missions. The missions choose them. Later, they enter a malfunctioning holodeck program based on the Captain Proton, that is Tom Paris's vintage black and white sci-fi fantasy program. The simulation traps them in Chaotika's lair, where Janeway is mistaken for Queen Arachnia, and Chaotica relishes the chance to watch his beloved Arachnia die for her supposed treachery. Act 4. Knowing that the only way to escape Tom's holodeck program is to access a nearby control panel, Janeway plays along as the villainous Arachnia, seducing Dr. Chaotica into injecting a gel pack disguised as a potion. Once the task is complete, she dryly vows to revoke Tom's holodeck privileges. Upon reaching the transporter room, Chakotay and Janeway encounter B'Elanna and several members of Chakotay's Maquis cell shortly after the caretaker mission. B'Elanna is skeptical about helping Janeway, but even across timelines, she still trusts Chakotay's word, even if she outwardly blames Janeway for stranding them in the Delta Quadrant. As they continue inoculating the bioneural gel packs, Janeway begins to question her future decisions. Chakotay, careful not to violate the temporal prime directive, assures her that she ultimately becomes a unifying leader, bringing together Starfleet and the Maquis, guiding Voyager through countless challenges and inspiring loyalty, growth, and hope in her crew. In the mess hall, now a makeshift hospital ward, Tom is treating radiation casualties. A dying Tuvok tells Janeway it was an honor to serve with her before succumbing to his injuries. The tragedy deepens Janeway's resolve to alter the past and prevent Voyager's stranding. Chakotay cautions her against violating the temporal prime directive. He reminds her of what she hasn't yet seen. The family they become, the lives they change, and the legacy they forge in the Delta Quadrant. Moved by his words, Janeway agrees to see the mission through. However, one last roadblock remains: Seska. But Chakotay has a plan. In engineering, Chakotay confronts Seska, who of course feigns cooperation, but secretly recalibrates the chronoton pulse to sync the ship with her time frame, hoping to seize control of Voyager permanently. Chakotay warns her that tampering could destroy the ship, but Seska, as always, believes she has all the angles covered. Act 5. Speaking of angles, the one Seska didn't anticipate is an attack from above, as Janeway 1.0 sends an inoculated Tom and Harry leaping downward into the fray, while B'Elanna and the Maquis strike from hidden flanking positions. Seska briefly gains the upper hand, capturing Janeway and using her as a shield, while demanding Chakotay help her get access to the ship. But 7 of 9 bursts through the doorway, armored with Borg shielding, and proves to Seska that resistance is indeed futile. With the final gel packs installed, Janeway instructs the crew to return to their respective time frames. Chakotay will be sent back to the moment of the surge to reset the deflector polarity, erasing everyone's memory of the temporal event. Before parting, Janeway and Chakotay share a reflective moment about their bond and unspoken feelings. Back at the moment of the original anomaly, Chakotay successfully redirects power to the deflector, dispersing the surge and saving the ship. Janeway, unaware of the timeline that just collapsed, questions Chakotay, who cryptically cites the temporal prime directive. Later, over cider in Janeway's quarters, they discuss childhood fears, close calls, and the unknowable future. Though Janeway seeks answers, Chakotay offers only playful evasion. They toast to the mysteries, past and future, sealed by duty and time. Hopefully, they've found a way to accept these new resolutions. The end.
Yeah, you had to work in resolutions, didn't you?
The opportunity presented itself.
It did. Well, I look forward to talking about what they're maybe doing to the audience here with, spending a lot of time with Chakotay and Janeway in this episode. But let's start at the beginning and let's talk about Chakotay and his booze. I like the fact that this is the thing we're introducing, that he's got some contraband booze.
Was that on the Valjean and then transported over to Voyager before the Valjean was destroyed at Caretaker?
Maybe. Did he have time to say, like, oh, no, wait, let me get my bag of stuff, my cool Maquis clothes and my bottles of booze? I don't know. But then so he goes over to Janeway's quarters and she says dinner is late. And I'm like, how can it be late? You literally just say, computer, make food. Like, there is no late anymore,
I mean, I like the joke, the burnt phosphorus reference.
Of course.
But, I mean, how is that like someone in engineering hasn't fixed the captain's replicator yet?
I mean, look, the replicator technology seems pretty foolproof at this point in the 24th century. And yes, you have an incredible engineer like B'Elanna. Part of me, though, I like the idea of having somebody on board who is not technically savvy. It's sort of like you can tell 100 of your friends, like, yeah, you just, here's how you use Face ID, or here's how you fill in a password, but there's always one person who just won't get it no matter what. That's kind of a reality.
It's like the IT thing. It's like, is it turned on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Turn it off.
Turn it on.
Yeah. It's nice to see Harry in the captain's chair again.
Without any drama.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good makeup on Chakotay. I thought that was a cool effect as he's phasing in at a time. And as we start to play with the various timelines that we're in, I thought it was very clever to just make that transition happen by the Doctor not having a mobile emitter. And then the next thing is Janeway having the bond of steel. Like, you don't have to immediately do it later. Hey, what's today's star date? But early on, you just go, oh, no, it's just these things, these context clues, Biggest context clue of all, Seska.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. I mean, I love the character of Seska. I love Martha Hackett's performance. Yeah. The only thing is, like, I wish I wouldn't spoil at the beginning with Martha Hackett's name in the credits.
Yeah, too bad.
At all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a James Bond trope when a villain says, give me the codes, or something like that, Mr. Bond, or I'll kill you. I'm like, well, if you kill someone,
you're not going to get
then you don't get the codes. Right. So it's very, that's more along the lines of chaotic, threatening arachnia.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Also, remember, folks, Sucker Punch Chakotay is the best Chakotay.
More of that, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what we've been missing all along. We do learn a Ferengi saying, a good lie is easier to believe than the truth. And I wrote, boy, ain't that the truth. You're talking about a Star Trek truism that definitely has resonance. That is it. And, oh man, I like seeing Anderson, but probably the worst security ever. Maybe because he's been trained by Tuvok. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, so Chakotay, for the second time, just strolls onto the bridge.
Yeah.
And he literally walks all the way across, halfway across, and then Harry's like, hey, right past four people.
I know.
Yeah.
It comes up a few times in the episode, but we're early into, or maybe middle of the way in Act 2, and I feel like we're just completely giving up on the whole temporal prime directive thing. I mean, Janeway says the less she knows, the better, but come on. This whole episode is just like, we're going to break it, and we're going to break it again, and we're going to break it. And then Janeway herself was like, no, really, I want to break it.
Right. Yeah. Well, remember, she's taking her own advice from the future. It's like, the prime directive was never really broken. It was just bent very,
beyond recognition.
Yeah, exactly. But I did like when Chakotay said, because Janeway wanted to say, hey, I'm inoculated. I can go through all these temporal rifts now. And Chakotay said, without me, you'll be walking into a future that you know nothing about. I thought that was really smart.
Isn't that all futures?
Pretty much. But especially the ones that she's walking into.
Yeah. Yeah, that was there are some very poetic lines in here. I like when they go into astrometrics, and I believe it's Chakotay that says, "Are you Icheb?" And I'm like, what gave it away? Like the very specific Borg implants that are Chakotay's and nobody else on board? Like, yeah.
I will admit, I was really sad to see adult Icheb not wearing his Icheb sweater.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah. No, I'm glad that he and Naomi got uniforms, actually. Although we kind of get rid of the weirdness right away, because they walk into astrometrics and it's like, oh, you died 17 years ago, but hey, welcome. Come on in.
Don't you like what we've done with
Yeah, we're just not going to linger on that at all. And Naomi announces, okay, we got 37 time frames, not 47 time frames, because Joe Manoski's hand is definitely no longer here.
That makes me sad.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it's really, 47 was the thing.
Yeah.
Adult Icheb says it shattered the space-time continuum aboard the ship. Now it's the name check. We've seen a lot of name checks happen.
Yeah, we sure have. We saw a lot last week, but golf clap for that. Yeah, well done. I really like adult Icheb and Naomi. I kind of wish that we got more of them, or we get to see them again. Maybe we will. I don't know. Maybe we know. But of course, we get a name check, Samantha Wildman, and no shot of her at all.
Sad.
Yeah.
Very
But
sad.
typical. Very cool to see Seven in her original Borg look with the heavy cyborg modification. So cool.
Sure.
I mean, too bad for Jerry Ryan, probably going through way more makeup and wardrobe on those days that they had to set up for that. But what a perfect way to place this sequence in time. And so, well, I'll come with it later. So I did do a little bit of research to see how they did that, but I'll come back to that.
I wonder if someone out there, and I'm sure someone has asked Jerry in a convention, or in an interview, was it difficult for you to get back into the prosthetics, after all this time?
I mean, I guess this is always the risk. It's like you have this role, and this show can go anywhere because it's science fiction. So, yeah, may do that.
Literally go back in time.
Yeah.
Literally. Speaking of literal, retconning in time.
Yeah.
Redemption for the bio-neural gel packs.
Yes.
Originally, that was the whole, was it GNBN?
Yeah, right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Prop.
Yeah.
But nope. Saves the ship.
I'm glad we actually make something of it, finally. Yeah. And I love that it was Seven. She's just going right for let me assimilate you. And, yeah. Sure.
I like that.
Kind of fun to see the macrovirus again. Never thought we'd see that again, but that was cool.
I was hoping that we would see Club Bro Medi. That's where
That's where
the great assault of the macrolides
sure was, yeah.
But we do get a sick burn on top, which is always appreciated.
Yeah.
So Janeway said, doesn't sound like Mr. Paris's tastes are very sophisticated.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
More of that, please.
But also, I did appreciate Captain Proton was dubbed by Chakotay Savior of the Universe.
Yes.
Cue Queen theme song right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I thought was really funny, too, when the robot said, do not resist, which means in Borg terms, resistance is futile. So I thought that was kind of...
Oh, yeah.
The robot said that.
Yeah, smart, yeah. And by the way, also we mentioned it before, but, Flash Gordon's specific references, but like using the lightning shield, of course, that was around Mongo City, and then death rays, 1930s sci-fi and serials, it just lousy with death rays. So, yeah.
The whole thing, when they said that, I was like, I'd love to call John Wright.
Yeah.
It's like, raise the lightning shit.
Yes.
So the Wardrogic Ajax is like beaming towards Mongo City. Yeah.
Man, I just need to go watch Flash Gordon again. That's it. Yeah. Cut to the future in the mess hall, and Tuvok looking pretty rough. And I wondered exactly when that was and under what circumstance, like how bad had things gotten after that instance with the time anomaly, and then I realized, okay, we're specifically in Chakotay's timeline with that temporal anomaly. So then, okay, if you wipe that out, then you definitely wipe everything out. So now we just get a death scene because we can have a death scene. Yeah.
But that's when I watched it multiple times, as we do for Mission Log, it feels like that there was a scene that was missing that, predicates this scene. Because Tom didn't notice that Janeway's hair was different.
Right.
Okay, so that was kind of like weird clue 1. Weird clue 2, Neelix knew how Janeway took her coffee, but Janeway doesn't know Neelix.
Yeah. Right.
So Neelix said, I've been making your coffee this way for the last 7 years. Yeah. So they didn't really make, kind of like any issue about that. So I was like, okay, what happened? Like there was something that, like, didn't they say that this is Captain Janeway from the past?
Yeah. Right.
Because it was just all very well accepted as it was happening. But the Tuvok scene in the mess hall, I thought they lost a really good opportunity here when he looked at Janeway and said, I have been and always shall be your friend.
Oh, yeah.
Because, he, when he was dying, he did give the Vulcan salute.
Yeah.
And it would have been neat if he just looked at Janeway and just said, remember, That's just me being selfish.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people felt that way too.
Yeah.
Don't worry. You'll always get the last word Chakotay says to Janeway about his future. Yeah. It's kind of a backwards compliment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I like that. I do like, there's a Janeway line that she has to Chakotay. Another one that I like, when diplomacy fails, we need a backup plan. I mean, you could pretty much assume from the start that Seska was not going to warm up to the diplomatic approach. So Janeway, totally correct on that one. And, Seska, again, what did you think was going to happen when you went in there? So, Chakotay better think of better ways to lie. Come on.
I mean, we talk about Scorpion. That's like literally like the Scorpion parable right there.
It really is. Yeah. So now Janeway, inoculating a bunch of other people from different timelines. I thought that was such a fun idea to bring everybody together. It kind of reminded me like of the ending of Time Bandits.
Right.
You just sort of go around and pick up everybody that you've seen from whatever time they occupy and just, okay, get them all in the same room together. And at that point, we're just not worried at all about stuff breaking the timeline. We just assume it'll all reset. Love to see Seven just waltzing in, shields working. Phaser's not going to phase her, pun intended.
That was like the F around and find out.
Yeah, that was cool. That was cool.
Yeah.
And then Janeway, just going right for the big question, right here in front of all us fans. How close do we get? That's, okay, thirsty Janeway. Thirsty Janeway is best Janeway, maybe.
And
then Chakotay just lies by omission. How about that bathtub, Chakotay?
Some things aren't resolved. My answer to that Ever heard the phrase, "You want sizzle on that steak"?
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then Chakotay, okay, now he's playing coy. When he shows up later, and he's like, I can't tell you, it's a temporal prime directive. I mean, he actually could answer it. Okay, because that nebula was a chronoton storm. They encountered it. Things would have gone timey-wimey, so he can just say, like, yeah, here's what would have happened. Yeah.
Sure. I was waiting for, like, Holt just to, pop in like the Kool-Aid Man and say, hey, time traveler.
Right, yeah.
So they have timestamp 39 minutes, 57 seconds on Janeway 1.0's bridge, I should say.
Yeah.
We saw Helmsman, but I really thought it would have been cool if we saw Stoddy at that.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Stoddy was still alive. The Doctor was still alive, etc.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been cool.
And I was hoping that there was a story that Janeway was telling Chakotay at the end about how a lightning bolt split like this old tree in her grandfather's backyard. Yeah. I wish she would have carved a baseball bat from that tree, because for me, that would have been the natural choice.
Last call on the Kazon and the macro virus while supplies last. Come on, you know you missed them.
I'm sure that we'll find a few topics to get into here, but I also feel like this is one of those episodes where it's just, we have a technical problem to solve. So we need to solve the technical problem. There's going to be a lot of adventure and action along the way. And that is what we get, and I'll see in summary at the end if that works for me. But I do like a time travel. They're not necessarily traveling in time, but a time-bending episode. But there's something here that I got to call out right away, because we've mentioned it before in other time travel episodes. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the timey-wimey stuff is that it is also a space and location problem that I think is even harder to reconcile here. So, right.
I see.
So if you're Marty McFly in a DeLorean going 88 miles an hour, and you're at Twin Pines Mall. Uh-huh. Okay, not only if you are going back in time 30 years, that is 30 years over which the Earth position and our solar system's position and the Milky Way's position have changed.
Correct.
Right? So you actually have to be in the same space, not just the same time, right?
Right.
Now, in Voyager, you've got Voyager having traveled 70,000 light years from the Badlands, and another upwards of 40,000 light years to where we are now. Correct. At various points, right?
Right.
That's a difficult thing to happen. I like that we have a pre-caretaker sequence in this. We have pre-caretaker Janeway. That's pretty cool, But you literally, you're walking through one of these areas in the ship, and you're not just traveling a couple of years back in time. You're traveling tens of thousands of light years from where they are now.
Right.
Yeah. So that is a problem. Now, I was trying to keep that straight in my head, but I was also just thinking about you writing the recap and trying to keep straight in my head when we are where, or where we are when. And I thought, you know what? I should just go back and look at the script and see how this actually finalized itself in the final draft. I kind of assume that there is another document somewhere, or maybe a chart somebody did somewhere, because in the script.
Oh, are you going to Trecophile us?
I'm going to Trecophile you. Yeah.
There we go.
It's a little less specific than I thought it would be. And it's really interesting. So, when you say, Chakotay's first experience is he wakes up in sickbay, and suddenly it's the Doctor pre-mobile emitter. The only script note is season 1 sickbay.
And also, I think there's another little bit hint. It was more subtle than not just the emitter, but Picardo's curmudgeonly attitude was also very much Doctor 1.0.
He was playing a different Doctor, which was really cool, or a different iteration of this Doctor,
Yeah.
Now, you fast forward a little bit in the script, and things do start to get a little more specific when they need to be. So we're vague about season 1 when we talk about Janeway. because, it's just season 1, it's early Voyager because they're in the Badlands, and you have the context clues of referencing, like, the doctor. No, not the holographic doctor, the doctor.
Right.
And then, but then...
Roga Danar, right?
Yeah, oh my God, that's good. Yeah. But then when you go to engineering and it's Seska, it actually says from basics.
Right.
And then when you go to Cargo Bay 2 and it's Seven and the Borg drones, it actually says from Scorpion Part 2.
Part 2. Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, this is cool that we're mentioning specifically what script we're referencing or what production we're referencing. But then I also thought, especially for the bits with Seven and the other drones, like, this is a pretty big imposition because, what we're actually concerned about is how we get away from species 8472 and how we reconcile this thing with the Borg. That seems to be a lot more top level important right now than other Janeway and other Chakotay walking and saying, hey, can you help us with this temporal thing? So Scorpion Part 2 is a lot more explodey and a lot more high tension, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think, when it comes down to this, I mean, everything is just I think it's very transparent and mechanical for very specific reasons. With, Seven, I don't think that, like, the Borg would be, like, they wouldn't have been so, like, I guess, like, alarmist when it comes to, like, this, whatever, like, Janeway and Chakotay were doing, because, 8472 was, they were in this war thing, but I think that if we drill down to telling the story, as you say, in the right sequence, in the right timelines, but in some way explaining away every single way that, like, the confined area that was divided by bulkheads, that was subdivided, like, into these different time streams, I think that even the best writers would have been bogged down with that kind of technobabble minutia.
Oh, completely. And maybe that's why we get to a point in this where we just decide, okay, if this thing gets fixed, then everything gets fixed. Although for some reason it's only Chakotay. Even though I guess we land him at exactly the point before the anomaly hits the ship that he can trigger the deflector. He's the only one who is spared from not remembering. And at that point, it doesn't really matter if Chakotay is going to tell Janeway a bit too much. Maybe, what would have happened is said, like, oh, yeah, we totally have a relationship at some point, kind of, maybe.
I mean, there's, for all of you Stargate SG-1 fans out there is an episode, and I'm not going to spoil it, where a specific character does a very specific, something that we wanted to see. We, as the audience, wanted to see happen. And it happens in the episode, but because it's a time travel episode, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? So there was a wink, wink, nod, nod from definitely the writers, producers, showrunners who love the fans and say, like, we're going to give you your fan moment.
Right.
That they could have done here, a Janeway and Chakotay moment that could have been easily retconned as the reset button is well used in Voyager, to just basically say, nope, everything is going to reset to the point where it's like in yesterday's Enterprise, when all of a sudden you see the last bit of the Enterprise season that cells go through the rift.
Yeah.
And then, Picard's standing there all stoically with flames and stuff like that around him. And all of a sudden it's back. It just snaps right back into normal time.
Yeah.
That could have been it, where Janeway and Chakotay were really close and maybe they had that moment, and then snap. It goes back to real time where it's her and Chakotay's just like, what is going on? What are you doing?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that would have served the purpose I think it needed to serve. And I don't know. I kind of wanted that moment.
Maybe the thing that isn't believable here, though, is we don't actually know how much time we're taking in these different timelines, right? So, and I guess what's also weird is that Chakotay can't, I guess he can't walk back into that space that is his normal timeline, because things will just keep going badly there for him and potentially everybody else on the ship. There may be no more ship to go back to at a certain point, but we don't know in real time how long this is taking. Is this all over the course of a few hours? Is it a couple of days? Whatever. But Janeway goes from, who are you? I am chasing you in my reality, and I'm ready to have security throw you in the brig, to like, hey, do we ever hook up? Is that is that part of my future at all? We seem to go from point A to point B in a pretty short amount of time, especially for Janeway.
That's what Dante's Inferno does to anybody. Right, John? I'm telling you, like,
okay,
if I handed you my Dante's Inferno, I think our relationship would completely change.
Okay, I think that must be it. It's the book. Yeah. Which I think we may come back to Dante's Inferno for sure. Yeah.
Here's a question, though. So there is, the quote from Janeway saying that if the timeline is restored, the rest of us should have no memory of what's happened here.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we're dealing with, and this is a great observation in one of the Marvel movies. I think it was Avengers Endgame, where I think it was War Machine Rhodes said, which version of time travel are we talking about? Are we talking about, Back to the Future time travel? Or are we talking about, this other version of time travel? And this is like a Star Trek version of time travel, or Doctor Who version of time travel.
Yeah.
Right. So we know that multiple universes in Star Trek exist. We've seen that with the Mirror Universe.
Sure.
And we've seen that with different versions of the Mirror Universe.
Mm-hmm.
We've also seen, different realities where, timelines cross, the Venn diagrams of space and time and thought and all of those things, are manipulated. So would the characters revert back, like when Chakotay activates the deflector dish, and then everything is supposed to go back to normal? It's only from his point of view that goes back to normal. So if there was another timeline that was established because this temporal flux, was changed in some way because Chakotay did break a couple of prime directive rules, and Janeway did too, then wouldn't that have splintered off some type of subcategorized timeline that these new characters would have eventually had their own timeline established? And
completely.
I mean, that's how time, at least that's how kind of like the branched timeline dynamics work in Back to the Future.
Yeah. Well, but okay, wait a minute. Okay. So is Star Trek 4, is that a different thing where it's one timeline, and if we go back and bring the whales back, then Earth doesn't get destroyed, so that destroyed version of Earth does not happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the same logic of Star Trek 2009. Are we allowed to talk about that? We've covered it.
We haven't gotten there yet, but, we'll get there.
But it was a very specific thing that J.J. Abrams wrote, that Spock had the soliloquy of, this is the fact of this particular timeline when the Kelvin was intercepted by the Narada.
Yeah. Everybody stay tuned. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah. So that changes the timeline, right? Yeah. So everything is the same up to a point, right? It's not like, when Back to the Future, obviously everything skews from when George McFly is murdered, and then, Biff and, has Biff Town. But yeah, I'm trying to make sense of it in the way that yesterday's Enterprise made sense of it, because after Tasha goes back with Castillo on the Enterprise C, then Picard's timeline is restored. But Tasha is in a past of which she didn't exist, from which she didn't exist.
Yeah.
Has the child, either Castillo's or the Romulan commander's child, and then that's Sela. But Tasha remembers everything from the Enterprise from a different timeline that she served on.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. See, first of all, that's the problem with telling a story like this anyway, where you have the rule that you introduce and say, well, nobody's going to remember anything, except for somebody who does. Because ultimately, my question about an episode like this is, well, if everything gets reset, who benefits? Like, what is the character arc? And the only one who we know remembers what happened is Chakotay. So ultimately, we have to come around to this question of, like, how does this serve Chakotay if it's his story, his experience, and he's the only one who remembers anything? In Back to the Future, well, Marty McFly remembers everything. He has reset the time. He's surprised as anybody to find that he lands in, like, the good version of living with his parents. So there is benefit to that. There are lessons to be learned for him from that. But in this, nobody else learns anything because everybody else gets reset.
Yeah, that's true. The one thing, though, that I really did like, in kind of like revisiting the Janeway of the past, I don't know if Kate, found some type of way to kind of like look at her past performances, maybe look at her past scripts or some of the Janeway-focused episodes from like the earlier seasons, and really tap into the maternal Janeway that I really loved at the start of Voyager. Because there's something that she did. And I've always talked about Kate's, like, just these nuanced moments in her performances.
Yeah.
It's when she and Chakotay walk into Astrometrics with the adult Naomi and Icheb, and there's just a look on her face like, this seems like something that I want in my life. Like, these are like children that it's like she doesn't know them in that time frame, but there's something about how she reacts to them, like, okay, this is like meaningful to me. I just don't know why.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's like the power that she has, and the connection that she has with how much she cares about the children of her crew. Because she's always about, like, if this is going to be a multi-generational ship, then we're going to have to start seeing these crewmen pair off and have children of their own.
Right.
So it's just, I don't know, like, what type of conscious choice or subconscious choice she made. But that's what I've always loved about the Janeway character, especially when it came to Prodigy. And it felt very Prodigy-esque.
Yeah.
When she was dealing with adult Naomi and adult Icheb in that way.
By the way, here's another little side trivia note, is that our adult Icheb is only, the actor is only 2 years older than our our adolescent Icheb.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. That happens in casting. Yeah.
So going back to Dante's Inferno, because, it put an idea in my head. And the idea is that this book, right, there's a line of dialogue that there's a deeper connection with not just lending someone a book, but letting someone a book that was once a gift from your fiance. So Chakotay says, in the middle of the journey of our life, he's quoting Dante's Inferno, I found myself astray in a dark wood where the straight road had been lost. And then Janeway says, I didn't know Dante's Inferno was on the Maquis reading list. And then Chakotay says, actually, I borrowed your copy. And then Janeway says, my fiance gave me that book as an engagement gift. I've never lent it to anyone. And Chakotay says, not yet. That right there,
that seals the intimacy, as it were.
It does.
Yeah.
It does, because it's the barrier, it's the line that he was able to cross in their relationship.
Yeah.
Because at one point in time, I'm sure that this book, Dante's Inferno, given to her by Mark, was probably one of the last possessions that she had of her life in the Alpha Quadrant that she probably cherished and held on to. But once you, like, give that to somebody else, it's not just like, here's a book or here's a pad or here's a phaser or something like that. It's like, this is my fiance's book.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of transferring my feelings that are no longer with him to you.
Yeah.
Right. And I found that so incredibly, just subtly well written.
Yeah. You're right.
The intent is there.
Yeah, you're right. It's a way to get across a lot of information with very little expository dialogue. All we need to know is there is this thing that represents a kind of intimacy, a kind of personal stake for Janeway. And I agree with you. In an episode that is so focused on the technical issue at hand, they found some little moments to drop in the character stuff that I think really serves anybody who's been following Janeway Chakotay this whole time.
What's the point of breaking the temporal prime directive without bringing home any lottery numbers?
All right, we made it. We have bounced all over this episode from beginning to end, from one time frame to another, but it always leads us to the same place. We always get to the end and we have to ask, does it hold up and does it stand the test of time or some other time? Or some other time entirely. So, Shattered, the episode where Chakotay is walking through Voyager's history and potential future. Norman, does Shattered hold up?
So, this is the interesting thing about what you and I do, John. We've said this before, but if you're a first-time listener, thank you for listening. If not, you've heard us say this before. We kind of like take our approaches independently and write our notes independently. And as I'm looking through our script here, we have both kind of like seen the same thing, maybe like a little bit in different perspectives, but we have seen something that is very common. And so it's not a deep episode.
No.
Right? By any means, but I found it entertaining.
Okay.
Right? And the way I took it, this is like Voyager's version of what in the industry we call a clip show.
Yeah.
Right? But a clip show, traditionally, it's like a show that, okay, we have to fill ad space, in our schedule, but we don't want to pay any more production or actor fees or anything like that. So we're going to take a story that revolves around maybe one character, and this character's memories of these specific events, which are usually kind of like the highlight reel of either a season or an episode or a combination of both.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of like what we have here. We have like the sentimental highlight reel, right? Voyager's greatest hits, held together by the techno-babble glue, if you will, right? Of a time spatial anomaly, like filled with neutrons and chronoton particles. That's just kind of like, oh, look, chronoton particles. Obviously, it's going to be a time travel.
Obviously, yeah.
Right. So here are like the episodes that were like specifically referenced. You had Caretaker, you had Basics 1 and 2, if you will. You had Scorpion 2, you had Macrocosm with the viruses, and of course you have Captain Proton and Bride of Chaotica.
Yeah.
These are all fan favorites.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing about those episodes that I've actually ever read or we probably talked about that we're like, no, these are the episodes that people don't like. No, these are the episodes that people do like.
Yeah.
And it's like the Valentine episode. I mean, maybe that's what it was. Maybe, in this particular time in season 7, maybe the writers were saying, you know what? This is a thank you, a love letter to the fans who want to maybe see more why Janeway and Chakotay could or couldn't have. Could they have done this in a different timeline? Could they not have? Let's see like how these different situations from the past inform the future. So you have all of that. I love it when it's not kind of forced because you're like, oh, well, of course they're going to put this clip. If you pull a clip out of context and throw it into a clip show, it feels like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same kind of purpose.
Yeah.
I also love that it's not a Q episode. That could easily been snap here, snap there. Let's kind of like, have fun with Voyager, the characters, and, their emotional catharsis and arcs. No, it's a stroll down memory lane. I think it had a purpose, and I found it really satisfying. So I personally do think it holds up.
Okay.
Just because it wasn't a traditional, transparent, Q-involved time travel episode. I'm not dissing Q. It's just that it's so easy to do. It's so easy to put Q into a situation where he snaps his fingers and the mayhem occurs. So I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
It was more clever than that, and I appreciated that. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're on the same page because my first note, as you saw, how do you do a clip show without doing a clip show? And there is something very clever about that, yeah, you don't invoke cue, you don't just grab clips, but no, we actually create something original that allows our characters to revisit moments from the show's past. And obviously we know that, we're swiftly approaching the middle of the last season. I have to say that I enjoyed our conversation. I enjoyed our look at this episode more than I enjoyed the episode. I feel like we've been asking all along for Voyager to do some kind of long-form continuity. And we do get pieces of that from time to time. But this isn't the version of long-form continuity that I wanted, which is a character going like, oh, hey, I remember when that thing happened, and this other thing is about to happen if we don't do this thing that is supposed to happen. So what I really like, though, here, there is a tremendous attention to detail. And you literally are mapped out on the ship, like this is happening here, this is happening here. And we kind of know through Chakotay's point of view where things are supposed to be. I also like that it is mostly a Chakotay and Janeway episode. Sometimes we miss the ensemble feel of the show, but in this, I think it's really played to good end, where you have, as you said, a bit of resolution to resolutions. Chakotay is now the one who gets to say, we do not resolve this because there is nothing to resolve. Don't ask questions, and that's that. It also gives the episode this kind of weird feeling, like the ship is sort of empty and it's just these scenes that are playing out kind of behind closed doors until they go there. And that's partly because, well, these characters need to stay away from there because it'll mess things up if we don't. So it's, the tip of the hat here to JC shippers. I think that's fun. But overall, I come to the end of it, and especially after having watched it several times, it's a walk down memory lane, but maybe not in the way that I had hoped it would be. As I asked in the last segment, like, who benefits here? Because if it's just Chakotay, well, what does that mean? That he's just going to have a drink with Janeway and say, yeah, I can't tell you what happened, but we're pals, and here's my secret stash of booze. So maybe I wanted more out of the meaning of it all. And even stuff that I like. I mean, I like seeing the macrovirus again. I like Captain Proton, but I feel like we've already done that arc. And we've already done the bit, which is break Janeway out of her comfort zone and put her in this weird place where she has to act like, a 1930s over-the-top character. So I didn't necessarily need to spend all those minutes there, at least not now in my Voyager journey. So for what it is a clever sci-fi way to tell this story, but I didn't necessarily need this story. So for me, it doesn't hold up, not for lack of originality, not for lack of fun, but I don't think I need this one, and I don't think I will need to go back to it. But thank you for not being shades of gray,
Right.
But let's talk about morals, meanings, messages. And I have this suspicion that we'll probably land in a similar place. So you brought it up in the last segment, the Dante's Inferno bit, being a tip-off to this intimacy, this level of the barrier being broken down between Chakotay and Janeway. And we'll share the quote again, because why not? It's from Dante's Inferno. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward path had been lost. Now, Chakotay says, his interpretation of this, which I think is great, very valid, of course, if you always see the road ahead of you, it's not worth the trip. That is the thesis of the episode anyway, because he gets to look back at all these moments of Voyager's journey and maybe piece them together a little bit. Does reliving the moment with Seska, does that help him at all? Not necessarily. It's just another puzzle for him to solve. But as far as the production goes, we as the audience on Voyager's journey too, we are all coming up on Voyager's end. So like you said, the Valentine to the audience is, let's go back and look at these things that we enjoyed along the way. Now, there are deeper ways to interpret what Dante is expressing with this phrase, though. And I think all of those are also valid if we want to take some other looks at the journey in the episode. So midway upon the journey of our life, well, we're also talking about midlife. Dante was in his mid-30s when he wrote Inferno. And for somebody at that time, that's pretty much the middle of your life.
Much.
Yeah, you're lucky if you made it that far. And if you made it that far, yeah, you'll probably live longer, but you're right at the midpoint. So there is this kind of existential point where Dante has arriving within the forest dark. What is the next move? Where do you go next? And the straightforward path, maybe the things that were clear cut, the things that were easily understandable about a defined path ahead, isn't there. So you've got to find that thing again. You got to get yourself literally back on the right path again, which Chakotay has to do literally here, but there is also a figurative reconnection. And that's why I like that we bookend with this scene with Janeway. There is the figurative reconnection with Janeway. What is this all about? What is this for? Well, we're here and we're enjoying this moment because we're friends. May have also been lovers at some point. Remember the bathtub, you know? But it is a bit of a character reset and moment of reflection for Chakotay especially, but the two of them together to say, here's where we've come from. That serves as context to where we are now. And now is the time for us to reassess the values and reassess the mission ahead, because that ultimately is what makes us who we are. So great choice by putting Dante in there. It is not all hellfire and damnation.
Right.
There is certain some self-reflection inherent in this phrase. So what else have you found, Norman?
That's actually really interesting to think about this in context of what you just said. Is it possible that the lesson that Chakotay learned after experiencing his past with Janeway is not to reveal his feelings for Janeway because there are still possible catastrophes, possible challenges, possible life and death situations where they need to be separate in their ability to function to protect and save the journey?
Okay. So you think, are you saying then that Chakotay still has some feelings in this forest dark, and maybe he's got to kind of recommit himself to a straightforward path, or else he will get distracted by this other lingering personal question?
It's very well possible.
Okay.
Sometimes the greatest true act of love is sacrifice. And that's where I see the reference in Dante. I think it's really awesome that you brought it up. I didn't look at it that same way in my morals
of course
messages, but it made me think about, okay, so what did we learn here? What did Chakotay learn? And maybe his big takeaway is the reason why he can't say anything and uses this well as a temporal prime directive is because he can't go down the path of the more personal connection he makes with Janeway, the more personal connection he makes with Janeway.
Yeah.
And I think that he needs her to stay focused on the task at hand, which is getting the ship home, than putting her in a position where she's going to have to make a choice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is, it's kind of like the tragedy of the isolationism of being a captain.
Yeah.
Right? So I didn't really think about it until you brought that up. So thank you for that.
Yeah. No, fine. I love that. And I think that is the beauty of using something like that quote and then throwing it into a sci-fi, a high concept sci-fi show where you also have a personal relationship going on. Like that is a really great merging of those worlds. But yeah.
The one thing I took away from this is this aspect of we can never truly see the big picture, can we? You know, and it's very much akin to what you're saying with Dante's Inferno. We're going to do a little script reading here.
Sure.
Get into the parts of Chakotay and Janeway. So if you wouldn't mind doing Janeway, I'm
Sure.
Chakotay. Okay, so this is the scene that really kind of like crystallized things for me. Chakotay says, with all due respect, it's a little presumptuous to think you have the right to change everyone's future.
From what I've seen, they'll thank me.
All you've seen are bits and pieces. You're not getting the whole picture.
Really? Just what am I missing?
It's not what, it's who. So that got me thinking. So there's this debate that's always been at the question, and at the core of kind of like these time travel stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are given the chance to go back and do something catastrophic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's that. You know, the old adage, the meme of, you know, Dr. Ian Malcolm saying, like, your scientists were so preoccupied, if they could, they never stop to think if they should.
Right.
Right. And do we really understand the consequences of that change? Almost like reversing the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Because we always get fixated on the suffering part, like the raw, immediate impact of the tragedy that you want to prevent, like activate the omega-13. Right, 13 seconds, if you're Galaxy Quest fan, which I'm sure many are, 13 seconds to undo a mistake, right? But sometimes we have this obsession with erasing that pain, but we overlook what that pain created. There's a strength, I would dare say, a beauty, there's a determination, there is a positive result that may come from that pain. So you take this time travel, this classic experiment of, all right, if you had the ability to go back in time and assassinate Hitler, would you? Most people would say yes.
Right.
I'm fairly certain. It seems like an obvious choice, right? You erase a monster from history, you prevent a war, you save millions of lives. But what happens to the world after that power vacuum is established? You know, or never created? And I haven't seen Man of the High Castle. I'm sure that's a very good series, but that's beside the point. But you know, I think it's a philosophical question about time, being able to manipulate history. Because sure, Hitler is personified as being one of the greatest evils in the history of the world. But look at what happened when basically the collective of the world's people, resources, determination, sacrifice, all of that was brought to bear against this one man and, you know, his army and his beliefs. What did that do to the world? You know, it changed culture. It changed technology. It changed allies. It changed resources. It created alliances that were never there. You know, it created futures for people that never existed. It, for better or worse, gave us the rise of the atomic age. Right? So take this. I mean, I think this is a very Star Trekian way of analyzing this experiment. It says, if Janeway was never stranded in the Delta Quadrant, then what happens? Right? Then we don't have the iconic future Star Trek captains that we see later on. We don't get Seven of Nine. We don't get the Okampa. We don't get the Hirogen. We don't know what was going to happen to the Borg. Maybe they would have completely lost their war against species 847T. And maybe that would have been a good thing. We don't know. And not to spoil anything, we wouldn't get Prodigy either. So that's beside the point, right? But we don't get that legacy that Janeway establishes if she rewrites history, or her mission to go into the Badlands never happened. Right? So it takes that one decision. Do you have the right to change that decision? And it brings me to a lot of people, you know this, and you'll probably roll your eyes at saying this, but it brings me to Babylon 5. There's a quote that J. Michael Straczynski wrote for one of his characters, and this character said, "The past tempts us, the present confuses us, and the future frightens us, and our lives slip away moment by moment, lost in that vast, terrible in-between. But there still is time to seize that one last fragile moment." And looking back on that and applying it to what we've just discussed in this episode, that's where we live. We lived in this fragile in-between where choices are made, under a lot of extreme circumstances, and it gives us a certain identity that allows us to move forward. We don't get to rewrite history. We don't get to do over history. We get to listen to history. We get to learn from history. And that's kind of like a very Star Trek thing, right? It's always been about like looking at a vision of a future that's not perfect, but it is earned because you don't look at the mistakes and say, I should have erased them. You take those mistakes for what they are, and you kind of like build up this entire movement of hope forged in the hindsight of those mistakes.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Lineage.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Chris Garris, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takachi. Does anyone else suddenly want the Delta Quadrant as a Death Trap t-shirts? End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.